Welcome to The Spawn Chunks, episode number 355 for Monday, June 23rd, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version that goes out on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Jonny, but the internet knows me as Pixel Riffs, and joining me, as always, is a vibrant Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello. Do not adjust your screens. This is a pale yellow t-shirt. I just have vibrant visuals turned on.
Very good, very good. Unbelievable.
Could not resist.
We're foreshadowing all of the discussion at this point.
Yes,
yeah.
I kid. We will get into all that later. It is an orange t-shirt. Don't worry. Speaking of the vibrant things that we've been up to on the weekends, Jonny has made black currant sorbet and served it to his D&D friends around a sweaty D&D table. I was enjoying fish and chips on the waterfront here in Halifax. So it was a very summer weekend for everyone. If you want to hear more about that, then check out the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the program. It's available at patreon.com/thespawnchunks to our patrons, the people that support our show financially. And we thank you very much. And as a result, you get 30 to minutes of extra footage, extra content every single week. We also have special hangouts every month. Coming up at the end of June, we'll be hanging out with our patrons talking about what they've been up to in Minecraft. Hopefully some happy ghasts and some vibrant visual builds coming our way in that hangout. So stay tuned for that. And if you are looking ahead this episode, we are, of course, going to be talking about Chasing the Skies. We're going to be talking about happy ghasts, and we're going to be talking about vibrant visuals, all coming up on this episode of The Spawn Chunks.
Yeah, so you dove into vibrant visuals on stream, but did you get any work done on the Citadel this week?
I did, and I've been checking off some boxes. We have finished the east bank of the Spruce River, so all the way through the entire build area. The east bank has got all the details in. I've been working on this for a couple of weeks now, so people would have been familiar with it. But I added some details around a bridge coming into the Westell Valley, trying to make it look more muddy and earthy underneath it. I had the opportunity to mess with the tall dry grass. I didn't end up using much of the short dry grass, but I used some of the tall dry grass, which works very well with my custom wheat texture, which is a pale yellow, like what you would see natural wheat looking like in the real world. And pale or tall dry grass works very well with that. It looks like a younger version or a shorter version of the wheat. So on the edge of the wheat field that's exposed at the river that you see when you walk into the valley, I tried messing around with some textures, and it looks pretty good, I have to say. The only frustration, happening when I was doing that was you can't put it on farmland because it floats above the farmland, like it doesn't actually connect like a crop does. And if you are unlucky, depending on what block you're putting it on, it's like grass. It doesn't go in the center of the block, which is right. Unlike crops. Crops are always like dead center in the farmland. But for this, sometimes you'll put it down and it'll be very much on the edge of a block. You're like, well, maybe I won't put it there. I'm going to pick a different block where I'll get like a more central position. So you kind of have to mess around with it. But I do find it works pretty well. I didn't work out a way to get firefly bushes in there because I have them elsewhere nearby. They kind of read as firefly bushes in the wheat field as opposed to a stage of the wheat growth. So I might try something like that in another build sometime. But I did a custom tree, and I'm at that point now where I'm putting in the detail on things like rivers or roads just until they're out of sight of the build. Like once the river goes around the bend, I'm back to Minecraft default gen. Don't care. Like as long as it's good up to that point. And it's the same old tricks. Like I was just putting in grass and ferns and the new bushes, and then like bone mealing everything to like cover up the dirt sides and make it look more lush. Adding some moss inside the custom tree, and then adding glowberry vines hanging down from that to kind of have like a weeping willow sort of vibe without going full mangrove. Was fun. It's not a big tree, but it was just enough to kind of create a border. Like it feels like the edge of the build. And then I was like, okay, beyond this, I'm really not too worried about, what's happening. So now the task is going to be to go down the other side of the Spruce River. And that's going to be more challenging because it's a spruce taiga biome. So I can't use moss and azalea bushes in the same way, because combined with the river biome and also the taiga biome, the greens are just very different. So I'm going to have to rely on grass. And thankfully, I've got the new bushes, and they will change with the biome color. So if that's the plan, that's the plan there. So I'm happy to have the rivers kind of like sorted out right now. We're almost done.
This is making me jealous that I don't have a flat river in the Windy City project that I'm planning on like returning to for more building stuff, because I really appreciate like the flat kind of it's like doesn't read necessarily as a flowing river, but you can tell there's like this implied movement to the way you've shaped out some of this stuff, and I imagine the seagrass probably helps it feel like there's a bit more motion even if the water texture is relatively flat. But having this kind of smooth countryside and farmland leading down to the river is so picturesque. I feel like the best I can do with the area I've got, because it's all fairly high elevation, is start a river somewhere up in the mountains and have it flow down and be able to like create something like a riverbank area before it inevitably falls off into the ocean about 10 or 15 blocks. So I'm taking a few notes here of like some of the stuff that I really like. I really like the contrast between the wheat field with the dry grass that you've got in there being a bit of retaining wall, and then the riverbank being just as overgrown and lush. I feel like the contrast between the two types of vegetation, but a similar kind of like structure to each of the plants, really lends itself to a shared ecology to the area, and I think that looks really great. So I'm trying to like reimagine some of this stuff and how I'd have it fit to my world, because like some of this stuff generally feels like you're at the height of your powers building wise. I think like with all the stuff you've learned as you've been building West Hill, I think this stuff is like icing on the cake at this point.
Thanks very much, man. It's a lot of fun doing the trial and error aspect of it. So it does take some time, but I don't feel it as challenging as it used to be. Like I used to think about this like, man, this is daunting. But if I can dispense any tips, I would say like one of the best things that I've learned to do is, rather than trying to detail the whole bank or look at the whole bank as a task, do a section, like do a thing, like do a wharf, do an edge of a wheat field, do a custom tree, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden you've got a point A and a point B. You've got the wheat field and you've got the custom tree. And then the only thing you have to worry about is just the in-between. And the in-between is much less important. So you're sort of like doing the Bob Ross kind of like happy little trees in between things, like little blobs of paint that like don't really look like anything if you're looking up close. But if you kind of see it in context, like between a mountain and between the big tree in the foreground, everything kind of like works together. And that's what I think is happening here. And that, you know, like I have the points of interest in the contrast, but then I can just like, which allows me to get away with a lot of just like, I'm just going to put some random bushes here and hope it looks okay. And ultimately that's what ends up working. But I really appreciate that, man. Thanks. It's a lot of fun to not only kind of have these things checked off, but like feel like I've got some skills in that. And in my, I used to think about it like in my quiver, you know, when I was an artist, you know, working as an artist more often, like things like knowing how to draw a coffee pot, knowing how to draw a hand, knowing how to draw a bunch of household items when I was doing comics, like not having to look up what that looks like and just being able to do like a cartoon version of it off the top of your head is really empowering when you're doing that kind of stuff. And I feel like the same thing is true in Minecraft. Like for you, like when you go to build a house or you go to do a little farm or you go to do, you know, decorate a room, like you might look up reference if you want to do something new, but if you're just doing something where this is either temporary or I know what I want, you can just do it. And there's something really freeing about having that repertoire of skills in Minecraft. And I've been extending those because one of the other things that I know how to do now after spending so much time in West Hill is building roads. And the tip there is like having a map mod to do like a top-down view really is helpful. And I've been using that a lot. Barring that, I also have the free cam mod for like screenshots and showing things off on stream. And that also helps you get up much, much higher. Now, people with happy ghasts can do that in vanilla and get a very high view, a top-down view. So if you're building a road, I would say get your ghast, your happy ghast up high and look down and see what your kind of like your pixel drawings are for the edges. Because it took me a while to do, but I've extended and I've textured the West Road. The textures go up to the bridge, and that's more of like a brick road with a lot of cracked bricks and stuff like that. But then over the road, over the bridge rather, I've extended it into the Western Hills. And again, the idea was like, I want the experience of coming into West Hill to be a controlled experience from all the different directions. And this is the last one that hasn't been really kind of customized. And so I had to raise the road to meet the kind of the gap in the hill. I wanted it to curve. I wanted it to kind of go through these two. There's this natural gap in this really cool kind of like mountain range. And it reminds me of the oracles from Neverending Story, sort of. and just kind of like you have to walk between these two things. There's less judgment here, but it's still there.
Yeah.
And it provides this really cool opportunity to frame what is essentially the main gate tower of Westhill as you approach from the west, which is really cool. So you're traveling east, and then you go up this windy kind of, not stair. I wish we could do ramps in Minecraft, but we can't. It's a gradual incline, and then when you get past the final, I guess, overpass, then the whole thing kind of opens up. You see the bell tower, you see the keep, you see the town, everything. And that has yet to be finalized. I've only just started this. So this week is going to be me finishing up this area. And I'm really happy with like this broad stroke of like, this is how I frame stuff out. So for people that are seeing the ends, of Westhill, like the river decoration and all this lush stuff that I'm putting in at the end of things, this is kind of where it starts, like with a brick road, natural Minecraft generation, just kind of controlling the direction that the player is facing and what's being revealed, and then going back and saying, okay, well, I like where this road is and I like where this mountain pass is. Now let's like add the bushes, add the trees, add the grass, add the flowers, like all the things that kind of make it feel natural. And so I'm looking forward to having this like final approach filled in, because hopefully other people on the server will build in the medieval fantasy area, and these roads could, like, you could extend my road and connect it to your kingdom, or maybe I get bitten by the fantasy bug again and I want to build something later on. I can come back and then maybe I connect another kingdom to the west to Westhill and call it something else. I don't know.
Yeah, much as the desire is there, I'm sure, to be done with this project, I like the idea of giving yourself a way back in future. If, a couple of years down the line, probably you're deciding like, I need to go back to that style and revisit things, or maybe do a neighboring kingdom that's got a slightly different build style. It's in a different biome, so they have different natural materials and stuff. But this is highlighting something that I need to do more, and I've tried this kind of approach before and had some success with it, which is building everything out of just a basic stone palette until you get the shape. So like, if you want the edges of something, you use stone brick. If you want the center of something, you just use natural stone, because inevitably you have a ton of that from digging it up with silk touch in caving expeditions or whatever, going mining for resources in the early game. You always have a ton of cobblestone. You can easily smelt that if you need it, but then it gives you a flat texture. The texture is just there to provide shape. Sometimes in the case of this, you'll leave some of that stone there for the sake of it being a stone road that leads somewhere, but then you can always swap it out later. The goal is just to get the shape down first. Make sure you like the shape before you start decorating it. And I did that with the museum in Season 2 of Empires, and I think I really need to start doing that with more other projects, like shaping out the shape of things before I start actually texturing anything. And I've done that once or twice with other materials. If I start with the gateway that's in the Windy City red terracotta, because I know that the majority of it is still going to be made out of that, and then I can work with the color palette from there. I've had some success with that. But yeah, I think honestly just having a stone road, especially for this medieval area, makes sense at first and gives you a great canvas to work with after that.
Yeah, making it regular stone was also a time thing, because I've been a little frustrated as I've been doing these gradual inclines with the brick roads, because you don't have cracked brick slabs. Your slab availability for different textures is a little bit more limited, and cracked bricks as full blocks look so good in road texture. To then not be able to use them for the 6 or 10 blocks that you've got on a half slab incline, you're just like, okay, well, this is frustrating. So by moving everything to regular stone, eliminating the use of cracked bricks in the actual texture when I get there means that I can just do like andesite, cobble, and mostly stone and just leave it at that. And so it'll be a little bit faster, because again, I'm trying not to put so much work into something that ultimately people visiting Westhill will never see. Because it's over the hill, right? So it's been fun. But so that's like kind of what I've been up to creatively with this week. What have you been up to?
So I immediately upgraded the Minecraft Survival Guide to 1.21.6. I am chasing the skies as soon as possible, and so I spent my very limited amount of Minecraft time this week finding, crafting, and even bartering for dried ghasts. So I went out and found an unexplored soul sand valley, got I think 3 or 4 from the bone structures. Like whenever you find one of the larger ones in an unexplored soul sand valley, there's usually a dried ghast there. So they're pretty plentiful as it is. Obviously wanted to demonstrate being able to craft them and barter for them in the video. Fortunately, the piglin that I bartered with was very helpful, even though the dried ghast is supposed to be a rarer trade. Like they gave me one within a couple of gold ingots. So not having that many dried ghast crafting materials, I don't have much of the ghast tier in storage. I might need to focus on that if I end up finding them overwhelmingly useful. The main thing I've noticed so far, which we predicted based on snapshot playtests and stuff, is that you probably want, if you're traveling long distance and you want them in a different place, you probably want to grow them where you're going to use them rather than try and take a Happy Ghast the world over, because the Windy City project is about 6,000 blocks away from my spawn area. That would take a long time on a Happy Ghast, so I just took a couple over there and hatched 2 by my starter area, and I've now hatched 2 in the Windy City as well. The ones in the starter area, I was just kind of experimenting with a bit of flying around, detailing some of the underside of the floating island. Found them fairly straightforward to use so far. No real complaints as far as the control stuff goes. Obviously, there's still a little bit of compromise figuring out how to fly downwards and things like that. So there's, bits and pieces that I still need to get to grips with, but I think I'll find them fairly natural to use once I've done it a lot. And I'm actually planning on leaving them flying around the pirate ship that's up on the floating island, because the original illustration by Greg Fromenteau that I used as inspiration for the build has a whale flying around like the top sails of the boat, so I think it actually works quite well for the Minecraft version to have a couple of ghasts flying around there. And the next Ghastlings have been hatched over at the Windy City, where they're currently tied to the top of the gateway, but I'm planning on demonstrating with those how they can be used to haul cargo and leash boats and mobs and that kind of thing. So I'll probably airlift a couple of llamas or, chest boats and things like that just to demonstrate their functionality. But like you, I also spent a bit of time this week in Vibrant Visuals exploring that on stream, so most of my thoughts are going to be in the main discussion for that. But I did a fair bit in Vibrant Visuals. I went out to some cold and temperate biomes from my Badlands spawn, went to the Nether, and raided a treasure bastion while I was there. And then at the end of stream, just because I hadn't found them already, we popped into creative mode to teleport to a Pale Garden, and then people said to go to the end as well, so I briefly went to the end and kind of, flew around the outer end islands there. So I think I've got a decent grip on Vibrant Visuals, even though it's not come to Java Edition yet, so looking forward to our discussion focusing on that later.
Yeah, I didn't really get much past my overworld exploration in Vibrant Visuals and Bedrock. Because I'm new to Bedrock, I decided to do like a survival experience. Like I didn't jump into creative and bounce around at all. I probably should have, because I ended up dying about halfway through the stream after the first hour or so. And I had my diamond pickaxe, I had my obsidian, I was ready to go. I was ready to go to the Nether and experience that and see it. And then I died as I was escaping the caves. I ended up just getting shot by a skeleton. And we'll get into the Vibrant Visual stuff, but I mistook some shadow for solid ground, and it was not. And I just fell a couple of blocks, but it was enough to take another hit off the health, and then a baby zombie, and like there was just all kinds of problems that led to me dying. Also, I don't do PvE very much or very well in Minecraft, and then put that into Bedrock on top of things, and it was just a very different experience. I appreciate the tips that you gave last week, where I took like the animations, and there was one other setting that I changed. I think it was one of the video settings or one of the other settings on Bedrock. I also changed my hotkeys to match, because my sprint key is a little bit different, and my toss item key is a little bit different, and that kind of thing. But something that you mentioned was like the input lag in Bedrock. I didn't notice it much for building or moving around. It was more combat. I really felt like clicking the sword and when the sword actually swung was very different. And I feel like either the range in combat in Bedrock is the same or shorter than Java, because the building distance is longer. And our mutual friend and member of the community, Dan, mentioned that it is a little bit longer in Bedrock. And I think because of that, I got used to that distance. And then I was swinging at these skeletons or whatever was attacking me and missing, because I was just anticipating that I would be able to hit them. And so I found that was like that, combined with the Vibrant Visuals making caves very dark, I think is one of the reasons why I ended up dying. But the other thing that I noticed that was really, really strange was you have to crouch with the shield. You can't just block. And so when you crouch, and people were saying, well, when you use the shield in Java Edition, you slow down. It's like, yeah, but I can still I can still block in Java, slow down, and walk off the back of a block. Like I can back up. And in what was happening to me more often, ultimately when I die, but happened throughout the stream, was I would be wanting to back up from a skeleton or back up from something advancing, and I'd be on a 1 block high block, and I wouldn't be able to back up off of it because I was blocking and therefore crouching, and therefore you're crouch locked to the edge of the block. So it was really, I found it very restrictive. I found the movement very, very restrictive in terms of combat. And the other thing which I thought was really surprising, and why my screenshots from my Bedrock Vibrant Visuals adventures are kind of haphazard, is the screenshot button is obnoxious in Bedrock Edition. Like, every time I use it, there's a delay. So if you move your mouse at all, you're going to take a picture of the wrong thing. Then the screen flashes bright white, and there's a huge notification that says your screenshot has been taken and put in the screenshot library. No indication as to where that library is. I had to look that up on Reddit. And to find that, unless you really know what you're doing on a Windows PC, good luck. I ended up pinning it to my Explorer bar so I could find it again. That folder is then filled with screenshots that are out of order and paired with weird Java files next to them. So it's not even just a screenshot folder. So every other file is not an image. But what I found so surprising, with all the things that they do for accessibility in Minecraft, you can't turn off that flash. Like, you absolutely have to have that flash happen. And I would have thought, even my chat was like, maybe there's a setting in accessibility to turn it off or down. It's like, you're right, let's go look for that. Couldn't find it anywhere. And I was watching back some of the footage as I was like editing out some of my breaks and putting it up on YouTube. And like, you can see I light up like a Christmas tree whenever I take a screenshot. My monitor goes so white. You can see it reflected in my glasses, on me. It looks like I have another light in front of me. So that was a very, very strange experience. And so again, like, Vibrant Visuals aside, my experience in Bedrock was mixed. For the most part, I liked it. I felt pretty at home. I don't do early Minecraft very often, so it was a good challenge for me to kind of like, go raid a village, get a bundle, use hay for food, like all this kind of stuff. But some of the, I would say, the movement and the either range or perception of range, I found very, very challenging. Didn't notice so much of a delay, but just the range I thought was my biggest hang up.
Yeah, I think for me, it's the fact that you can spam click for combat still. And so a lot of the time, I think you're expected to kind of juggle something like a zombie coming at you, but they do seem to be able to attack you from a closer range than they do on Java Edition. Also, like the shield blocking thing, I also find kind of disorienting. I guess it's geared towards mobile players mostly, where not having a button they can hold in the same way that a full keyboard and mouse setup can is a little bit different. It's different even to having like a toggle crouch on console where you can click in a thumbstick and let that do it for you. So yeah, there's a couple of changes there, but yeah, it's a little strange to adapt to that stuff. Axes don't do as much damage either because of the combat rebalance from 1.9 Java Edition not happening on Bedrock ever, and so you don't time your hits. A sword is still a better weapon than an axe, and there's just so many like little things to remember that makes Bedrock Edition slightly different. So yeah, a lot to think about. But the whole reason we've been in Bedrock Edition this week at all is because Chase the Skies and Vibrant Visuals have launched. We're going to get into the news about that. First of all, the update launched on June 17th, 2025. There's an article that officially launches them and has a bunch of information and some colorful graphics for those of you who are interested in getting a quick overview of what's in this drop. And it says the Chase the Skies drop is a feature update for both Java Edition and Bedrock Edition, but Vibrant Visuals are currently only available on Bedrock Edition. In the Java Edition article for 1.21.6, which was also published on June 17th, they said, with 1.21.6, we are also taking steps towards adding vibrant visuals to Java. In this release, there are new fog improvements, and clouds will extend all the way to the horizon. Other new features in 1.21.6, the Happy Ghast mob, the Dried Ghast block, harness items, the locator bar, a new HUD element that shows the direction of other players in multiplayer, 5 new music tracks by Amos Roddy, and a new music disc with the track Tears by Amos Roddy. There are new advancements, and language support has been added for Old Spelling Indonesian pre-reform, and Cantabrian. To explain the Happy Ghast family, if you haven't been following along with the snapshots, the Happy Ghast is a new, mountable flying mob. It begins as a dried ghast block found in nether fossil structures, typically found in soul sand valleys. Alternatively, it can be crafted with 1 soul sand block and 8 ghast tears, or bartered from piglins. When waterlogged, it undergoes 3 hydration level changes over approximately 20 minutes until it spawns a ghastling mob. The hydration level decreases when it's no longer waterlogged using the same timescale. The hydration level is not preserved when mined, so you have to leave it there for as long as possible. It makes sounds and shows particles depending on the hydration level, and emits a vibration frequency of 11 when its block state changes, in case you're tracking that with a skulk sensor. The Ghastling, spawned from a rehydrated dried Ghast block, is a young version of the Happy Ghast mob. After spawning, the Ghastling will try and follow players within a 16-block radius, or an adult non-aquatic passive mob, or some of the neutral mobs within a 16-block radius. If no player or suitable mob is close around, the Ghastling idles within 32 blocks from its home position where it spawned or was last interacted with, and it will reset this home position if it's moved more than 16 blocks away from the border of its home. They can be tempted and fed using snowballs, and they'll grow up into a happy Ghast after about 20 minutes or faster if fed with snowballs. Once fully grown, the Happy Ghast mob can be equipped with a harness and then be mounted by up to 4 players. They're tempted by snowballs or the harness if it doesn't already have a harness equipped. They will slowly regenerate health, with regeneration speeding up during rain, snow, or when flying at the same height as clouds. The first player that mounts the Happy Ghast will control it, sitting above it in the front seat. When controlled, the goggles of the Happy Ghast flip down to cover its eyes. Players mounting after the first player are placed in slots on each side of it, starting clockwise from the first player. Pressing the sneak key dismounts the player on top of the Happy Ghast, and if the Happy Ghast detects players standing on top of it, it ceases all movement and rotates to the closest cardinal direction. This happens regardless of whether or not it has a harness equipped, and there you can use it as a platform. When mounted on the Happy Ghast, the third-person camera is further away from the player to give you a bit more perspective on your surroundings. When there are no players mounted or walking on top of the Happy Ghast, it starts a roaming behavior. If a player dismounts mid-air, the Happy Ghast descends towards the ground before it starts roaming, and then the roaming behavior is similar to the Ghastling, except the radius is larger at 64 blocks. When wearing a harness, the Happy Ghast roams closer to its home position within a 32-block radius, and when leashed, it has a roaming distance of 10 blocks. The Happy Ghast will typically try to stay close to blocks when roaming, so hopefully it should make it easier to mount that way. Notably, the Happy Ghast cannot be bred. They must be grown from dried Ghasts, which can of course be crafted. They cannot enter boats, and they have no panic behavior when taking damage, which is useful, I found out, when you occasionally misclick a snowball trying to feed them. The harness is a new item that can be equipped on a Happy Ghast to allow players to ride it. It comes in 16 different colors. It can be crafted out of 3 leather, 2 glass blocks, and 1 wool block, with the wool color basically specifying the color the harness will be when you craft it. It can be re-dyed in the crafting grid if you don't like the color, and can only be equipped on the Happy Ghast. This of course allows 4 players to mount the Happy Ghast, and you can remove a harness from a Happy Ghast using shears when no players are currently mounted. Moving on to the locator bar, this is a new UI element that displays the direction of other players in the world. If another player is in the world and not hiding, the locator bar will display in the same area as the experience bar. When experience is gained, the XP bar appears again briefly, and if there are no other players in the world, it will just display as normal. Facing other players within a 120-degree range will display those players as colored indicators on the locator bar. Other players that are above or below the screen will also display an up and down arrow together with their indicator. The indicator will change to different sized icons depending on how far away the other player is, similar to how icons resize on a held map. The colored indicators are randomized for each player, but operators can modify the color of these indicators with the /waypoint command. Players on a team, if the team has a color, will override their default indicator color with the team color. Players can hide from this by crouching, wearing a mob head or a carved pumpkin, or by using a potion of invisibility. Players in spectator mode are also not visible on the locator bar to players in other game modes, but spectators are visible to each other. The locator bar can be toggled off by setting the locator bar game rule to false. There are a bunch of updates to music and sound, including some new soundtrack. Tears by Amos Roddy can be obtained as a music disc by killing a Ghast with a fireball deflected by a player. It has a comparator output of 10 when played in a jukebox. They've also added 5 new background music tracks by Amos Roddy, which are Below and Above, Broken Clocks, Fireflies, Lilypad, and O's Piano. They've added a new sound for when leads snap, new custom sounds for shearing, saddles, horse armor, and carpets from llamas. They've added a new sound category called UI for sounds played by UI elements such as button clicks. Music now plays even when the game is paused, and an option has been added to the music and sound settings that allows players to change how frequently music plays while in a game world. They've also added an option to music and sound settings that enables a music toast to be shown whenever a song starts playing, and with that option enabled, the song currently playing will always be seen in the top left corner of the in-game pause menu. There are 2 new advancements in 1.21.6, Stay Hydrated, a husbandry advancement when a dried Ghast block is placed into water, and Heart Transplanter, an adventure advancement that's unlocked when a player places a creaking heart with the correct alignment between 2 pale oak log blocks. Other changes in 1.21.6, they've changed leash mechanics and updated the recipe for the lead. Saddles are now craftable and shearable. They've updated the Ghast texture to match the Happy Ghast better, made improvements to fog, updated some music and sound, improved the realms configuration screen and introduced a region preference setting. Piglins can now give dried Ghast blocks when bartered with. Splash Potion's effect strength is now based on the distance of hitboxes. The target tolerance margin of projectiles now changes over time, making them more accurate at close range. They've changed Elytra so that while gliding, using a firework rocket will be used as a boost even if it could be placed on a block. Spectators will now teleport together with entities that move to other dimensions but will stop spectating them. They've also increased the third-person camera distance while spectating or riding Ghasts or Ender Dragons. A fix to a bug has been partially reverted, which means decorative hanging entities such as paintings and item frames are now immune to explosions from submerged TNT, while items and armor stands are once again vulnerable to them. Wolves, sheep, and pigs now have the texture on their legs mirrored. Clouds now exist all the way to the horizon with an option to reduce them. They've updated the pattern of clouds in the sky. Horses, donkeys, and mules can now be fed carrots to heal, grow, and improve their temper. The main screen panorama has been updated, and finally, as always, they have removed Herobrine. Additional details for many of these changes are outlined in the Minecraft.net article, along with updates to data packs and a long list of bug fixes. We've covered many of these in previous weeks as they appeared in snapshots and pre-releases, so we're going to wrap up the news read with a quick note about Minecraft Bedrock Edition. But if you want the full details, the 1.21 changelog for Java Edition is linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
Minecraft Bedrock Edition version 1.21.90 is of course out. That introduces the same core features as Chase the Skies update on Java, so we won't be reading the full changelog here, just the details of the currently available Bedrock exclusive Vibrant Visuals. Vibrant Visuals is Minecraft's biggest official visual enhancement, delivering a dazzling cosmetic upgrade with a new modern graphics pipeline and an array of visual improvements. Sunrises are more vivid, water reflects, forests become shaded, and more. Vibrant Visuals preserves what makes Minecraft uniquely special. Pixelated shadows, caustics, and reflections have been carefully crafted to preserve and enhance Minecraft's signature blocky style. With updated textures for blocks and items that decide how different light sources interact with them, builds will become more vivid and visually interesting. Updated art settings and post-processing effects tie the Vibrant Visuals together in a signature Minecraft way. As a cosmetic enhancement to the game, Vibrant Visuals does not impact Minecraft's gameplay, meaning you can play on Realms with friends whether they have Vibrant Visuals enabled or not, provided you have access to Realms and the relevant online subscriptions. Changes in Bedrock Edition 1.21.90 made Vibrant Visuals the default graphic mode for supported devices. To switch to Vibrant Visuals on Xbox One, Xbox One S, PlayStation 4, and some Android devices, players need to select Vibrant Visuals in the video menu going into the graphics mode dropdown. Performance may degrade for these devices. There are customized atmospherics, color grading, fog, and lighting for the end, the nether, the overworld dimensions, and a variety of biomes. Temporarily reverted weather-related changes to sky color in Vibrant Visuals, while some issues are sorted out. The following texture changes are all related to Vibrant Visuals. Added MERS texture support for signs. Added new texture assets for a variety of trims, particles, spawn eggs, water, and the dark oak boat. Updated the appearance of metals and a variety of block textures. Updated the cave vines, chorus flowers, pumpkins, firefly bush, and a variety of other plant textures. Updated the bee, dolphin, ghast, pig saddle, and strider textures. Updated a variety of MERS textures in Vibrant Visuals, including made glass blocks more reflective, tweaked metallics on cauldrons and ancient debris, tweaked emissives on eye blossoms, fixed an issue with leather armor having a stripe of emissive across the texture, added emissives to the ender crystal block to make it match the item icon, added MERS textures to the happy Ghast and the harness, added the glow lichen block emissives as well. If you're interested in the full Bedrock Edition changelog, that will again be linked in our show notes at thespawntrunks.com.
Oh, and that was a mouthful. So we got through it, and of course, as I mentioned, I have been playing a little bit in the Chase the Skies update on Java Edition, as well as dipping into Bedrock Edition to take a look at vibrant visuals. The main thing I have noticed, and I want to pull this out based on it being mentioned in the start of the Java Edition changelog, where they said they have made fog improvements along with clouds extending all the way to the horizon. I think, for my money, the fog is kind of intrusive now. And the first thing I noticed, having launched it for the first time to record this video on the Happy Ghast, is the world feels way foggier. I play on a 20 chunk render distance right now. I kind of oscillate between 16 and 20. I don't necessarily do it for the distance. I do it for the range of stuff in which I'm building in these areas, because I have mountains nearby that I want to be able to see from a certain distance, and if I'm standing on that gateway that I built at the Windy City, I can see the peaks of the mountains without them completely disappearing into render distance fog, where everything kind of turns into flat color and shading. And now I've taken a couple of comparison images, one from a world where I hadn't made any changes yet because I didn't have a recent image from the Windy City that was in a previous version, but this is from 1.20.4, was just another kind of launcher instance I had lying around that I could take a quick screenshot at short notice. If you compare that to the way things look now in 121.6 with the Windy City stuff in the foreground, but the mountains in the background, everything feels kind of washed out. And this is more noticeable during rain, but rain, I think, is intended to bring that fog in a little bit closer. I don't mind it as an atmospheric effect during water, but during full sunshine and, like, you know, some of the day-to-day gameplay that I typically have, normally I try and sleep away rain and thunder. I don't really mess around with that too much. I find that it feels misty all the time now, and that's not based on render distance at all. Like, if I adjust to 16 chunks, if I boost it to 24, the fog is still close to me, or at least, like, it feels like everything has this kind of vague mist to it. I'm not the biggest fan, to be honest. Like, I feel like the fog is too close to me. I don't mind it being layered, but I wish it started a little further away. I think really you start to notice blocks feeling paler at about a 4 chunk range, which is only 2 chunks away from the minimum Java Edition can do. So I imagine you'd have some thoughts about this if you'd updated the Citadel to 1.21.6 already, but I can imagine a few people are going to start installing mods when they become available, if they aren't already, for 121.6 just to prevent this change, because there is a pretty stark difference between how things looked previous to this and how they look now, and I think everything feels very misty to me.
And there's no slider? Like, there's no fog, low, medium, high, nothing?
Not that I've found. It's not related to render distance or simulation distance, and I don't know if there is a slider somewhere that I've just missed, but I took a quick look through video settings and I didn't find one. And it may be related to some other setting. Maybe if I change with, you know, particles or something, there might be an atmospheric effects thing in there somewhere. But it's the kind of thing I can expect, like maybe Sodium or, you know, Optifine, whatever kind of typical visual and performance enhancement mod people use, will probably tweak bits of that natively. But it doesn't seem to be natively supported by vanilla, as far as I can tell.
So looking at your screenshots, I can see what you mean. And what I think is happening is Minecraft is attempting to mimic atmospheric perspective, which is cool in paintings and in renderings and whatnot, and cool in video games where your render distance is a lot farther, or they're faking something in the distance like a mountain. The problem is that atmospheric perspective doesn't happen this close. So, and that's why I think it feels foggy instead of atmospheric perspective. And for people that don't know, you know, atmospheric perspective in either photography or art is basically showing the viewer the air between you and something really far away. Think something that's like, 100 miles away, like looking at a mountain in the distance. I saw it a lot when I was in Utah in 2017, looking at things that are very, very far away because the air was so clear and the land was so flat. You could see stuff very far away, but everything would be kind of like washed out because there'd be that much atmosphere between you and the thing that you're looking at. But things that would be, for the sake of a funny sentence, within a 20 chunk radius of me in the desert were still very clear. They're all still being hit by sunlight. There wasn't enough air between me and it to cause atmospheric perspective. If there was, it would have felt like the fog was rolling in the desert, which would have been weird. So I think that's probably what you're picking up on, just like naturally as a human, as someone that observes the world around you, knows what atmospheric perspective is, but then is seeing it simulated in a video game at a much closer range. My render distance right now is at 28 chunks for the same reason that you have yours set high, is that that's roughly the width of Westill from east to west. And so when I'm at one side of it, I'll be able to see the other side of it as a whole. And shortly after that, the surrounding countryside starts to fade off. But that's where I've got mine set to. And so it sounds to me that by turning on this setting or updating, I would end up seeing much less of Westill, regardless of my render distance.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to fall off in terms of what it can render. Like, it's not limiting my render distance to 16 chunks or anything.
Less.
So, but like, you definitely get that kind of... It's as though somebody's taken, like, a very low opacity, like, white paintbrush and just kind of done that over whatever the... like 4 chunk render distance and beyond is. And yeah, I think it's interesting because this is signposted as an improvement that's being made on its way to vibrant visuals, and if anything, this makes Java Minecraft less vibrant, perhaps as a contrast to what vibrant visuals is going to do. And obviously we'll talk more about the contrast of it all when we get into the main discussion here, but it's strange to me that the world feels washed out now. I imagine it's something that I might get used to over time. It's just notable by its contrast to previous versions at this stage. So far, though, it hasn't interfered with my experience of messing with happy ghasts, which has been a very positive one. I'm planning on using them a lot more and figuring out how to incorporate them into my building routine and that kind of thing, but with a lot of vertical builds in mind, it's going to be a fun experience. Right now, I'm still just like raising them and trying them out and getting to grips with the controls, so I'll have more to say about that probably next week, but outside of that, I'm much more interested in things like new lead physics and the other small changes. I love the soundtrack. I think the new tracks by Amos Roddy are great. They've gone into my like playlist rotation for stream music and stuff already. I don't care much about the saddles being craftable because my world is a long-term one. I've already got far too many saddles from dungeon loot and fishing and that kind of thing. But I do like the fact that we can remove them from rideable mobs like striders now. The shearing mechanics being kind of the same across the board after it was added with wolf armor. I think that makes perfect sense to me. So yeah, I think honestly, good update overall, like really happy that we've got happy ghasts at last. Obviously looking forward to whatever they announce next, but they can take their time with it as far as I'm concerned, because it seems like most of this is going to be pretty fun to play around with. I'm curious if they will maybe walk back some of the rendering stuff, but I haven't seen that much of the community reaction to that. If anyone else has raised a stink over it on various platforms, I haven't really seen. So it would be interesting to get some community feedback to our email inbox if anyone's interested in writing in about their experience in Chase the Skies so far and has any corroborating information or prefers the fog. Let us know. It would be really great to hear from you.
Before we get into email, I don't have any real, I guess, motivation to update to 1.21.6 right now. I mean, after hearing that about the fog, that doesn't really make me feel very excited. And it's not that I don't like the Happy Gas, but I just don't have a need for one in Westill, and that's my focus right now, is to finish that up. So I'm going to wait. The only thing that would push me would be either a performance increase, which is I'm always happy to get, or a opportunity to have vibrant visuals start coming in with snapshots. I would probably start a snapshot world before I would like roll the Citadel into a snapshot. But I'm also keeping an eye out for shaders that are mimicking vibrant visuals. And if you are the same, if you're on 1.21.6, either on a modded server or a modded world, I'm currently using Complementary Reimagines, which I've talked about a couple of times in recent weeks, and they have like a pixelated shadows and pixelated light with a bunch of different settings, so you can increase the edges and harshness of all that kind of stuff. And it does a pretty decent job. It doesn't do the reflections that you get in Vibrant Visuals, but it comes pretty close. And I found that I'm getting decent frame rates, like 30 to 40, which is good for me on my older system with shaders, which is pretty good. Also streaming at the same time. But I did notice this morning when I was looking around that Visual Vibrance is a shader for Java that's trying to emulate Vibrant Visuals. It was last updated last month. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. It's on modrith.com. And it looks pretty good from the screenshots. It looks like someone's kind of making the efforts for a shader that's specifically meant to mimic the caustics and the water reflections and some of the things that we're seeing in Vibrant Visuals. So if you're on the fence or you're waiting like I am and you still want to at least experience some of what Vibrant Visuals has to offer, then check out Visual Vibrance. Or, of course, play some Bedrock. I mean, I think it's important to check it out and give some feedback while you can, and help the Java edition by getting some feedback out there on the Bedrock edition.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's great that we now have access to both. Basically, if you own one version of Minecraft, chances are you have access to the other ones. So, yeah, hopefully that remains the case across the board. Either way, we're going to move into listener email. We've got a couple of emails about the Happy Ghast already. We'd love to continue receiving some of those. So if you'd like to email the show, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Keep them short and sweet if you can. It really helps us include them in the show more easily. But Joel is going to read us this first one.
Comes in from Samantha with a Septile, Ghast Racing. Hello, Joel and Jonny. I don't know if this idea was already rejected or wasn't pitched yet, but I'd really like a way to increase the speed of the Happy Ghast, mainly because I've been looking at them as race cars. Not high speeds, but like how pigs and striders get temporary speeds with their fishing rods. Something like feeding a Happy Ghast glistening melons to get slightly ahead of your mate near the finish line. What do you think of giving the Happy Ghast speed and handling improvement items? Love the podcast, turning in every week this week. Keep up the great work. Sam with a Septile walked into the racing zone due to Happy Ghasts.
I like the idea of being able to boost them. One of the things I like about riding Striders around the Nether is that they pick up speed immensely once you start like tempting them with the warped fungus on a stick. I think they come across as a fairly slow mode of transport at first, and then you right click and they start zooming, and like it instantly sort of endears itself to you as a form of transportation. So I do think it's a fun idea being able to boost ghasts that way. I do think a snowball on a fishing rod is maybe a little far-fetched from the physics perspective. I'm not sure how you get the clump of snow to stay on there. But then there's a couple of different perspectives on this based on existing precedent, because the carrot on a stick, if you use that to boost a pig, it eats about a third of the durability. Whereas if you put a warped fungus on a stick for a strider, it eats 1 durability every time you use it. The effect lasts for quite a while, and it has 100 durability. Obviously, you don't want to be stranded in lava, and I think with Happy Ghasts, you wouldn't necessarily be prevented from flying, and it wouldn't be dangerous for you to run out. So I kind of wonder if Snowball on a fishing rod actually works well, if it worked kind of the same way as the pig boost, and you kind of had to tactically time when you were getting the speed boost throughout a race.
I can see that in a mini game. Like I could see some way to increase the speed. Because again, I haven't tried the Happy Ghast firsthand. I've just been seeing what's online and hearing your feedback on it. And what I have heard though is that the speed and maneuverability is a little bit of a pain for some players, and I anticipate to be among them because I'm planning on trying to use the Happy Ghast for some building. And my guess is that I can build faster and think faster than the Happy Ghast will be able to move me around. And that's probably where I'm going to be like, this could really use some oomph. I know I've mentioned before that I don't want yet another item to actually have in my inventory. I don't want to have a snowball on a stick to then have it take up yet another inventory slot while I'm on a Happy Ghast moving it around. Not a big problem if it's a race minigame, like that's fine. I'm just talking about like when you have a inventory full of items that you're trying to work with and build with, and then you have to sacrifice one of those things for yet another tool. I already feel that pain now with like shears and hoes and axes and shovels and all the things you have to do to get specific blocks as you're working around. I do hope that they eventually give us some sort of like hover down control. From what I've heard, and I mean, you can confirm that you kind of have to look down but fly forward to move down at like either a 45-degree angle, or like you're still traveling horizontally as you go down, whereas you can travel straight up, I think, right?
Yeah, it's look based, like, you know, in the same way that if you move forward when you're looking a certain direction, you're going to travel forward. You can move up and down by either looking up and pressing forward, or looking down and pressing forward, or alternatively, you can look up and press backwards to go down, but then you're not looking at the ground. So it really depends on your
Right.
camera perspective as well. Like if you go into like second person or third person, you can probably get a different perspective on it.
Right.
But I do think it's a little finicky to begin with, especially if you're used to creative mode flight, where obviously space to
Yes.
ascend still works, but then shift to descend from creative mode flight is going to like throw you off the Happy Ghast and you're standing on top of it instead of flying it. So that's going to be a
Yeah.
bit disorienting for people who are used to that. I was wondering, since the sprint key isn't active on Happy Ghasts, maybe that could be utilized as a down key, but then that feels inconsistent with the other means of like creative flight and like 3D space movement that you have in the game. Then again, the sprint key, as we've sort of discussed through this email, isn't being used because you can't use it to boost the speed of the Happy Ghast. So to the survival players who might not be expecting creative mode flight anyway, at least it's something. Alternatively, find a way to make the sprint key work for Happy Ghasts, and I was thinking about potentially other ways of having Happy Ghasts be boosted. Since we already have firework rockets helping boost players with Elytra, what if they also boost the Happy Ghast a little bit? Like a player just sort of holds up a firework and, you know, the Ghast speed improves for a short amount. I honestly thought, while it probably wouldn't increase as much, like for as long or as far as Elytra or as quickly as Elytra, it might be interesting as a way of it reintroducing things like flight duration rockets. Because I only ever use flight duration 1. I'm not sure about you, but I've not seen
Same.
many people using the longer durations, because flight duration 1 is perfectly adequate. You use a few more of them if you want to travel further, but a lot of the time you're actually flying short distances and you want more precision, so you don't want to overshoot or still have like some extra boost when you're hitting the roof you want to land on or whatever it is. And so I'm wondering if maybe for a Happy Ghast race situation it'd be fun to distribute fireworks and have, you know, everybody have the option to use flight duration 3 and get that little extra boost in the process of boosting your Happy Ghast. And maybe there could be some fun mechanics to have there, but the only other thing I could think of is maybe like if Happy Ghasts are naturally a little faster, but they move at their current speed if they have cargo attached. So if they're already dragging something that could weigh them down, then maybe they move a little bit slower. I wouldn't want them to move slower than they are now, which is why I'm proposing like unladen Happy Ghasts could maybe travel a little bit faster. Whereas if they had like a chest boat, or like they're carrying a sniffer or something like that that naturally looks a little bit heavier, then yeah, maybe they could be moving a little bit closer to their current speed.
Yeah, I think a speed increase could be fun on a number of levels. I like the idea of a faster native speed, but then reduction in that if you're doing something, you know, with a boat or whatever, but then also the ability to, I like the idea of feeding rockets to the gas. I mean, this is the cartoonist brain of me. Like my immediate thought, which would be much to the delight of younger players, would be like feed a Happy Ghast a rocket and it farts, and then you take off
Sure.
like snot and just, you know, you're all of a sudden you're cruising around. Even if it's a short burst, it would be very funny. Again, like if it was something that you could do while you were riding it, like in the same way that you right click with a rocket to boost yourself with Elytra, if you did that on a gas and it fed the gas, then there'd be like a timing skill, like how long does that last? How many rockets do you have? Can you spam it? Can you not spam it? Does it have to be timed perfectly? Is there a cooldown after the burst, like where you can't feed it another rocket for a couple of seconds? Like that kind of stuff would enter in some of the skill that would be needed in a comically slow gas race, which I still find funny and appealing as a mini game. Like I think that's really, really cool. I was also thinking that you could enchant the harness. Like if you wanted to have different speeds, then having an enchanted harness might matter. At that point, though, like ultimately players are probably just going to go straight for the most enchanted, fastest harness and not use the others. So, I mean, it's kind of a give and take in terms of gameplay. One thing that I think is interesting about Ghast racing that you'd have to add is like some sort of competition, because with Elytra, the competition comes with you're traveling so fast that mistakes can be made. You're going to hit something, you're going to go off course, you're going to have to double back, and that mistake costs you time in the race. But with a Happy Ghast, you're going slow enough that the chances of you making a mistake are like slim to none. So you'd have to have obstacles like a redstone door opening and closing, a opening that is just big enough for a Happy Ghast, so the player kind of has to like really know both their hitbox and the hitbox of the Happy Ghast. Like, can you fit through this like Happy Ghast keyhole size, obstacle in the course? Or make random events, like have the course have like water come out of dispensers from above that might slow you down, or lava or something to avoid that's random and that causes some sort of like bumper car effect or something. Because otherwise, I don't know, as they are right now, from again observing from the outside, whether Happy Ghasts have enough variability to really have any competition in a race. Because otherwise, you're just going to be going just as slow as the person next to you down the stretch. Like, unless someone forgets to hold forward on the keyboard, then no one's really going to go any faster or slower.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if you could incorporate stuff like building in the process, because that's what Happy Ghasts are best at. If
right.
You're gonna have to stop mid-air, build something accurately, like reproduce this pixel art or something, and like it's just like a 5x5 square of different blocks or something. Then you've got to get it perfectly right and then move on or something. Or maybe even you're building an obstacle for your opponent. If you can kind of like build a door that they have to fly through at a certain point in the course or something, like that could be kind of fun. So
it's like those relay races in colleges, like run down there, spin around with your head in a bat and come back, and then like
exactly.
Try to pour a drink into it from one cup to another while you're dizzy, like that kind of stuff. Yeah, I can see that.
Definitely, yeah. There's room for creativity, I think, in that kind of race for sure. Especially if it's happening that slowly, you've got a lot of time to think about your strategy. So yeah, we'll see if anybody comes up with stuff like that in future. Looking forward to finding out. Either way, let's move on to the next email, which comes from Tofu Red Panda, also about the Happy Ghast, but about their utility in Skyblock. Hello, Pix and Joel. When listening to discussions about the uses of the Happy Ghast, my mind immediately went to my favorite way to play Minecraft, which is Skyblock. I think the Happy Ghast could be both game-breaking or a nice helper depending on the map and how it's implemented. For the traditional Sky Island-based version of Skyblock, getting a Happy Ghast too soon would eliminate the grind of bridging to the islands, for better or for worse. On a one-block map, it would be less game-breaking and a great tool for building. Interested to hear your thoughts and experiences with Skyblock. Tofu Red Panda sailed across the void safely on the back of a Happy Ghast. P.S. As someone in software development and release space, I really appreciate the insight the podcast brings to Mojang's development and release cycle, as I find it to be a fascinating release model.
Well, thanks very much. It's nice to hear that, since neither Jonny or I have any experience in software development. It's us commenting from a player and from a podcasting perspective on the cycle that Mojang is implementing from the outside, so to speak. So it's nice that it's resonating with someone that actually works in software. That's awesome.
Yeah, and obviously we can provide what insight we can through developer interviews and things like that. But I think Mojang has also been very good at communicating some of their development process and their philosophy behind the way they're developing Minecraft lately, which has given the amateur eye like mine and Joel's a little bit more information. So the info is out there. Going to the question now about Skyblock, I honestly think there is this inherent difficulty to acquiring a Happy Ghast under normal conditions, because, of course, you need access to the Nether, and typically finding it in the average survival world is not going to be that difficult. It's about as difficult as finding a Soul Sand Valley biome, which, to those of us prone to spawning in Basalt Delta, we know the struggle. But I think without any Nether generation inherent to some of those Skyblock maps, like the Dr. Trog version that I've played, which is now Skyblock Infinite, which I haven't played, but I played the version that was the precursor to that. You need to basically make a Ghast farm and get piglin bartering going before you would have access to things like Ghast Tears and Soul Sand. You could maybe make a spawning platform that Ghasts would spawn on, but it would be pretty dangerous to do that unless you had the right sort of materials and you could guarantee that you weren't going to be thrown off, or the floor underneath you was going to be blown up. So I think there's actually a lot that you'd have to go through, both to get hold of the Ghastling that you could then rehydrate to begin with, but also you'd need access to things like glass, leather, and wool to make a harness before you could even ride it. And sand being in limited supply in Skyblocks, normally there is, some sort of data pack that gives husks the chance to drop it, but that still involves you making a mob farm in a desert biome if you can find one. So there's inherent challenges to stuff like that, and the harness is necessary for you to ride it and control it. So I think while it sounds like a game-breaking thing from the get-go, by the time you have managed to obtain a Happy Ghast, you've already progressed far enough in the technical situation of Skyblock that, frankly, I don't think it's going to be that much of a game-breaking thing, because you've already got a transport network set up to the various islands, you've at least got some bridges made, you've traveled to the Nether, you've had enough resources generated to be able to build a platform that Ghasts and Piglins can spawn on. I think at that stage you're well up the tech tree, and the Happy Ghast is not going to be too much of a leapfrog ahead in terms of technology. What it is going to be is great for building, because I think once you've reached that stage in a Skyblock world, you are typically at the point where you want to spend more time on creative projects. And the pain with Skyblock always is having to start at a certain elevation and relying on water buckets or, very tenuous ladders and like different mechanics to get yourself up and down if you want to build in a large area underneath a floating island, whether to make it look like a floating island or to stylize it in a different way. You have to plan ahead for that. You have to either abseil down in whatever way possible, or end up building a platform underneath where you want to build and sculpt everything from underneath, and then take away that platform and return to the top of it to landscape it or whatever. So there's a lot of different approaches to Skyblock, but the Happy Ghast is going to simplify a lot of that.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out my last experience with Skyblock. I think the grindy part of it was my least favorite thing about it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I didn't appreciate the challenge or the locking things behind certain progression in the game and the grind it took to get there. It's like, once you've done the bridge out to one island, that's fine, but then you have to do it over and over and over again. And I think that that's where getting, changing your strategy to get the Happy Ghast in Skyblock, and maybe not going to the Dark Oak Island if you don't need it just yet, right? Waiting till you have the Happy Ghast to do that might be like a way to kind of reduce the amount of grind that you have to do, unless it's close by. But I feel like that kind of stuff might be something that I would end up doing. I forgot about the harness construction. I was thinking all you had to do was get to the Nether, but I forgot that you also then have to get the harness and the glass and stuff like that. And it's been a while since I've done Skyblock, but I remember the struggle for sand was real. I feel like I did a villager thing first before I actually got.
I suppose you've got librarians, right? Can trade you glass blocks. That makes sense. Yeah,
I could see also the ability to move items and mobs around with a Happy Ghast in Skyblock. I feel like that would be great, because I do remember how much of a pain in the butt it was to move villagers around, because you don't want them to fall off the edge, and you have to put up these guardrails, and it was really harrowing to try and get things done. And then to be able to just put them in a boat, strap them to a Happy Ghast, and move them wherever you want would be great. Vertical movement on villagers I find very tricky, especially in a situation where I'm pretty sure that I had villagers before I had access to the Nether, so I didn't have bubble columns. I couldn't just shoot them up a water elevator and get them where I wanted them to be for things like iron farms and that kind of stuff. So I could see Happy Ghasts being a good thing, and it's not like it. I agree with you. I don't think it subverts any Skyblock strategy. I think it just kind of creates a different order in which you might do things in order to get a Happy Ghast sooner than later.
Yeah, I agree. I think if anything, it might actually allow Skyblock players to keep some of the visual fun of there being separate islands out there in this void environment. Being able to build an island that's separate from your other thing and having a means of transport between the two, like you're using them as hot air balloons, and being able to move villagers from one place to another or mobs from one place to another. I think they've got potential to prevent things from turning out into the same generic Skyblock world that everyone typically creates, with one platform that's got the crop farms and one that's got the animal spawning area and one that's got this and that. I think it allows for a bit more diversity. And I don't see too many people playing Skyblock lately. There hasn't been a huge trend within the community, but I do wonder if Happy Ghasts are going to be the thing to change that. So it might be the time, if you're an enterprising content creator or just somebody who wants to get back into a certain way of playing Minecraft, it would be a great time to start a Skyblock series in 121.6, provided that the maps are updated for it, and that Happy Ghast crafting recipe is going to be very sought after.
And I know that a lot of times people will play a modded version of Skyblock, and I feel like if there was a mod for Ghasts that allowed them to go back and forth between 2 points automatically, then that could be a thing in Skyblock too. Like you could use them as a moving platform or parkour or whatever to allow yourself to go back and forth between certain things, rather than just having them wander around on their own like they do whenever they're, I guess not unleashed, but when you dismount and they travel back down to like a near ground point and then they move around. And I wonder what that behavior would be like if you dismount in Skyblock and you're nowhere near ground, or you're at level with ground. Like, do they just descend to the bottom of the world? Because that's not going to be useful at all. Like, I'd imagine there might be some behavioral bugs that would show up in a Skyblock situation with a Happy Ghast too.
Yeah, then again, you could probably clutch fall onto a Happy Ghast, and if you click into the saddle fast enough, you prevent yourself from falling onto the top of it, so you could rescue them with relative ease. Unlike the problems I've had has been with bees. Whenever it spawns bees in a bee nest near a naturally generated birch tree or something, you find that the bees typically float down to void level and can't come back up because they're trying to drift downwards towards a solid block, and they never find it, but they don't end up dipping further than like -64 at the bottom of the world. So yeah, it's very, very silly watching bees just collect themselves at the bottom of your Skyblock world. But I hope Happy Ghasts would be a little bit more salvageable than that. Can at least be tempted with a fresh harness or, snowballs or whatever if you can generate them at that stage. We're going to move on to the main discussion for this week, which is going to be about Vibrant Visuals, our first impressions, and a little bit of feedback on it. Joel and I have obviously spent a few hours playing in Bedrock Edition now to get a feel for Vibrant Visuals. Both of us have done this on streams, so we'll link the streams in the show notes this week as well. There should be VODs up on Twitch. I know Joel edits his for YouTube as well, and I'm going to try and get mine up on my VODs channel relatively soon. So I think the main thing to go over to start with, you went through the settings for Vibrant Visuals to look at how they could be customized. So if you want to give us a quick rundown of what your discoveries were there, I think that'd be really useful to anyone who's interested in checking them out but might be concerned about performance and so forth.
And I have an older system, so this was something I wanted to do both for the show, but also kind of to get the best performance out of me while I was streaming. The Vibrant Visual settings are found under Settings, Video, and then you got to scroll to the bottom, and you can choose Performance or Visuals or Custom. And I'll go into the Custom, but obviously Performance favors the performance of your experience. Visuals favors things looking really nice and doesn't really care what it does to your system. And then this should be, in my opinion, more accessible to players that are going to fiddle with this, because you have to go into the settings, go into the video settings, scroll all the way down to the bottom of the video settings to get into the Vibrant Visual settings every single time you go in and out of that. It's really something that should be easier, considering the level at which it changes your gameplay experience. I think people are going to want to make quicker adjustments, especially on older systems, because everyone's going to want to try this. And if your system's not up to speed, then you're going to want to try to dial it in for what's best for you. You also can't turn Vibrant Visuals on or off without saving and exiting the world in Bedrock at the moment. So you have to make that decision before you load up. It doesn't affect the load. Like, so if you decide not to have them, it doesn't change anything. You can turn them on and off as you want. You just have to reload the world every time you do that. The problem with that is that it makes comparing what things look like before and after difficult. Now, on a server, it would be even more difficult because time would be passing. But on a single player world, at least the time freezes when you log out and you log back into the exact same time. So if you're fast enough, you can take a screenshot and compare them. But really, if you're just looking at like, this is what this looks like with Vibrant Visuals and this is what it looks like without, because you have to do all this logging in and logging out in the meantime, you kind of forget what the other image looked like. So there's no real easy way to compare stuff. So that I found kind of challenging. And this may be a Bedrock problem / dead end, but I hope that they will eventually give a hotkey to either enable and disable Vibrant Visuals while you're in the world, or at the very least, a hotkey to take you straight to the Vibrant Visuals settings. Like, just pop it right up on screen, just like you hit escape, just like pop up the Vibrant Visuals and allow players to make those adjustments right there on the screen. I'm hoping that we'll have a hotkey for Java, or at least the ability to map one. So once you're in there, in the customizing the Vibrant Visuals on Bedrock, right now, there's a brightness setting, and this takes you to a slider on a new screen. And you've seen this on console, I think, before, if you're a video game player. It's basically 3 images. It's a creeper face or the Mojang symbol. But there's a dark one, a middle one, and a light one. And the idea is that, as according to the instructions, the one on the left is supposed to be not visible at all, the one in the middle is supposed to be barely visible, and the one on the right is supposed to be clearly visible. First off, following those instructions, the one on the right is never easily visible. You can see it, but it's not like really, really obvious. And then if you move things all the way to the point where the left image is not visible, I find when you log into the game, it is really high contrast, like kind of offensively high contrast. So this might be different monitor to monitor. I found the sweet spot was about 60 to 65%. They don't give you a number, which is inconsistent with the other ways that these sliders work in the settings, which is frustrating. But in the word brightness, if you put the slider around the E in the NESS in brightness, I found that's about where I found it looking okay. Again, adjust it based on your monitor and your experience, but you're probably going to have to do something that's not as per the instructions to get the best visual results. The next setting is clouds, and this is pretty more straightforward. It's low, medium, high, or ultra. I'm pretty sure this relates to the render distance of the clouds. I did not see any real change in the quality of the clouds, other than just like they change the way that they look depending on the time of day, sunrise, sunset, that kind of thing. And so I really didn't find it affected too much. I would leave this on low or medium, depending on how much you like clouds. If it's important to you, then leave it on ultra, but I found that it really didn't matter to me. I wasn't looking up at the sky very often. I was mostly looking at the ground. Volumetric fog quality, again, low, medium, high, or ultra. This applies to the fog that happens when you jump in water, enter the nether, that kind of stuff. I'm assuming also the pale oak forest, but I didn't find one of those. I only experienced the water, and I found that the higher quality level to be more immersive. I found that it did make it harder to see at first, but in a cool way. Like you jump into a body of water, and you can't see anything at first, but then after a couple seconds, it kind of like clears, and you start to be able to see a lot more, and it becomes really fun and cool, which we'll get into later as to why that's important. So if you're in water a lot or you want to explore that, I would leave that on as high as your system can handle. Same thing with reflections. We'll have some screenshots here in the show notes that'll compare both, but low, medium, high, and ultra regarding the reflections. Low really gives you the bare minimum. At sunrise and sunset, you'll see basically like a thin line, about a block's worth of reflections on the surface of the water. On ultra, it's going to bring in the sky color on the dome of the sky. It's going to bring in like reflecting the trees and the banks and the river, all that kind of stuff. So if you want to see that, then you're going to have to go up to the higher ends of reflections. I did find this affected performance a lot. So again, your experience might say, well, this looks really pretty, but I'm getting really choppy frames. I might want to lower it. I was never throughout all of this ever really to discern much between high and ultra. I didn't really notice. So you might be okay on high most of the time. Bloom is the last setting, and it, unlike the others, has a setting of 0 to 100%. You just move the slider up and down to where you want it. It only applies, as far as I can tell, to emissive points. So things like firefly bushes, torches, the kind of things that are going to emit light. I believe redstone, once you activate it, that kind of thing. I fiddled around with this. I had it really low for most of the stream because I thought it was affecting the sun. It does, but not enough that you really notice. And that's something that I did find consistent. If it's a really bright light source, like a torch, you're not going to notice the bloom differences between like really, really high and really, really low. Where you do notice it are on things that don't emit a full 15. Things that are on like ender chests or firefly bushes, glow lichen, that kind of stuff. You'll notice the slider will change it a little bit. And I've got some before and after screenshots as well. I left mine around 50%. I felt that was realistic. I found that if fireflies looked like torches, it was a little bit much. So I kept it around 50%. Again, your experience may vary, but that's kind of the rundown of how you can adjust the vibrant visual settings in Bedrock Edition.
That's really good to know, because I left all of mine on the defaults. I really just wanted to get in and experience the gameplay side of it, so I didn't really spend much time messing with it. I think I adjusted a couple of things and couldn't really tell much of a difference. I think it was mainly bloom. I also think my brightness slider might have been locked on 50%, but I'm not certain if that's some sort of hardware constraint of mine or just something that maybe needed to be adjusted before I went in versus what I could adjust manually on the fly. Because like you, I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't any way of toggling vibrant visuals with a hotkey. You had to log out of the world in order to change anything, because I believe, going based on my previous experience of Minecraft RTX, you could do that with Minecraft RTX. You could basically take comparison screenshots, you press the semicolon key or something, and it would change from one to the other, and it would just load up the rendering engine for Minecraft RTX with the press of a button. So while I'm surprised, I'm also kind of surprised that it was the default graphics setting when I loaded up Minecraft now, which means they're really trying to sell this as the experience of Minecraft going forward. If you were a new player coming to the game, loading this up on your Xbox Series X or whatever, and you'd never played Minecraft before, you would sort of assume that this was the way Minecraft has always looked, unless you'd seen any previous screenshots of Minecraft. Or maybe if you'd just seen people playing with shaders before, you might assume that that was what you had seen previously. So I think it's interesting that now, across any devices that support it, this is going to be the default graphics experience, especially with some of the stuff that we think deserves a little bit more time in the oven, and we'll get into that in a second. But so I'm playing this on a PC. I have a GeForce RTX 4070, a Ryzen 5 processor. I heard from some folks in my stream chat that they'd been playing on consoles as old as a PS4 and Xbox One. So evidently, the range of devices that support this actually goes back further than I would expect from something that's being developed as a modern visual fidelity upgrade to this game. But obviously, they've developed it with that in mind. They're looking at making this for a range of hardware so it can be as broadly available as possible. And I think the fact they're still bringing this as an update to Xbox One and PS4 is frankly quite impressive, that they've been able to get this level of visual fidelity out of a game that behind the scenes still has to be fairly complex from like a processor and logic point of view.
I'm on a Core i7 9700 GeForce GTX 1660 Ti, so it's a much older card. I do have 32 gigs of RAM on the computer, and I play at 1440. So like I'm pushing my capabilities even just with regular Minecraft. So vibrant visuals, I did notice some screen stutters and stuff at the settings that I was playing with to showcase things live on stream. But that is a stuttering issue I have had with my PC on various games, not just Minecraft. So that to me is like a local problem, not necessarily a problem with how Bedrock and vibrant visuals are set up. One thing I haven't done yet, which I should do, is load up Minecraft again on my Xbox, because I've got an Xbox Series X, and it would have more than the capabilities to render vibrant visuals. I don't know how comparative it will be, because I can move around so much faster with a mouse and keyboard in Bedrock. I feel like I'd be pretty slow going back to a controller, but I could at least take some before and after screenshots and move around and see what it really is like, knowing that the machine is not going to have any real hitches from a hardware perspective. So I'll try to do that for next week.
Sheep Scalber in our live chat actually says there is an option that says allow change graphic mode during gameplay that needs to be switched on. I kind of wish that was on by default, to be honest with you. I don't know why you wouldn't want to have the ability to do that on the fly, or what enabling that option could disadvantage you. Maybe if you hit it on the fly and you weren't expecting to, it might be disorienting or something, but I'm kind of surprised that isn't just a default option. That's a little odd. Either way, we should probably get into our first impressions, because we both spent a decent amount of time in it. Where did you spawn when you loaded up your first Vibrant Visuals world?
I was on a beach. Yeah, I spawned on a beach on the edge of a taiga biome, and I decided to walk around and find a village, because I was doing survival. I was like, I just want to find something where I don't have to build my own house or do my own food. I'm just going to have to try to find the fastest way. So I very quickly ended up in a plains. Like I moved around from plains, but I did take some screenshots straight away from the shore, because like I logged in at sunrise, as you do on a brand new world, and immediately was met with like the sun reflecting off the water and trees reflecting in the water. Like it was really cool. And then I played around with some before and after, and that's how I figured out like the settings for reflections and like what you get at low and then what you get at high. And so I was messing around with those. But then I went to the plains biome, and my overall takeaway after the first day or so was that morning and evening are the most dramatic, and they also look the best, because you get the really crisp yellowy sunrise, you get the warm kind of oranges and stuff that you get at sunset. I've actually had more of an offensive like orangey overtone from shaders at sunset in Java Edition than I did from the Bedrock Edition Vibrant Visual Sunset. I found that it was mostly the sky and the water showing off the orange. It didn't necessarily turn everything orange at sunset. And I think it's because they've lowered the intensity of the light and all that at sunrise and sunset. And I think that it shows off the capabilities and the colors and the shadows best. Obviously, shadows at midday are going to be harder to see because the sun is directly overhead and you're dealing with a bunch of blocky shadows. So if they're not falling too far from the block, it's just going to look like a little gray outline around the bottom of it. It doesn't look like a cast shadow until it's a longer, light length. I noticed that things were oversaturated midday. I thought it was very strange that the colors of blocks were changing as the day progressed, not getting more lit. They were actually changing color. And that I found was strange. Reds, pinks, yellows, oranges, and browns. The first thing I noticed was a pink pig, like sunburned neon pink pig. And I took some before and after screenshots to illustrate just how strange it was to see this bright pink pig. Again, I think your experience is going to vary greatly depending on what biome you're in. I found that some of the other biomes, it was something that worked out quite nicely. I really liked the cherry grove. Midday in the cherry grove was great. The pink wasn't like oversaturated. It wasn't blowing out. It was a much different experience. And then vice versa, the savanna was really strange. Like it was really yellow. I guess authentically so. Like it did sort of remind me of some like African nature videos that I've seen following lions around the savannah. But because everything has got that tint to it, not just the grass, I didn't want to build there. Like it didn't make me want to put down any blocks and see what they would look like. I just knew that they were all going to have this gross kind of yellow overtone. And so that was kind of where I was at, is that after I ended up dying after doing the adventure, I went exploring and tried to hit more biomes. And one of the restrictions I found with Bedrock is that I couldn't throw up any kind of F3 screen and tell you what biome I was in. So
yeah,
it was easy in something like a savanna or a jungle, or I didn't find a desert. Anything obvious, great. But if you're going through more of the subtle biomes, like a meadow or a cold rocky shore, like all the ones that they've added in Caves and Cliffs, like I couldn't quite tell, other than like, I think things have shifted here. Obviously I'm in a forest now, but like, is there a different kind of forest? Like where am I? And so you would notice the shift in the hue of what you're doing, but you wouldn't necessarily know or be able to say like, oh, this is a cold ocean biome that I just sailed through, and that's why the colors changed. Like it wasn't quite as obvious to track it. So that I found very challenging. But overall, I think the things that I liked the most were the caustics and the reflections in the water. Despite the performance tick, I still left them on. Like I was just like, you know what? It gets a little bit choppy if I was by trees and water. If it was one or the other, it was fine. Ocean was great. Forest, fine. But if it was like a river with a lot of trees around it, then I really felt the performance hitch. But it was just so pretty that I didn't want to turn it off. And seeing those caustics go 8-12 blocks below the surface, like when you're boating around and you can see them that far down, it really gives you a sense of depth and just atmosphere to the water that I feel in Minecraft looks really, really bland. Like when I went back to check without vibrant visuals, you get reminded what water looks like in vanilla Minecraft. And I've been playing with shaders for so long now that you forget. And it's really a huge improvement to water in Minecraft, I think.
Yeah, I think I had a similar impression once I found water or trees, because I spawned in a Badlands, and it gave a weird first impression, because first of all, the sky color I find way more exaggerated in Vibrant Visuals than in traditional Minecraft. I think spawning in a warm biome, the sky was noticeably cyan, and there's also this halo of light on the side faces of the clouds, especially at sunrise, and of course the first day in the game starts out at dawn, so it was immediately like a very kind of high contrast sky, and very bright and a very different color to the typical blue that I'm used to. I think it still changes color in default Minecraft graphics, but does that very subtly compared to the exaggerated nature that Vibrant Visuals adds to it. And the sky color then adapts for the temperature of other biomes. I found it a lot more pleasant, a deeper blue in forests and plains and frozen biomes. But yeah, the immediate contrast between the cyan of the sky and then orange being absolutely everywhere was pretty stark. And terracotta looked fine in shadow, as did red sand. It's much brighter in sunlight, and still the terracotta would read fine. The red sand I started calling Cheeto dust because it was genuinely like, it just looked like there was this orange powder everywhere, especially on the top face of the blocks. It was fine where there was a little bit of shadow where you were looking at the side face of a block and there was still a bit less light hitting it, but overall, the texture sort of disappeared into this very bright orange. And incidentally, while I was there, one of the other Bedrock-specific things I noticed was how some textures are randomly rotated, which I don't think is a Vibrant Visuals thing. I think that's just the way Bedrock is. And it looks weird with terracotta. You notice, I think because of Vibrant Visuals, the striations in the texture a little bit more, where those typically blend into a more flat texture that I'm used to. You end up seeing the vertical stripes next to the horizontal stripes sometimes, and it kind of threw me a little bit as I was exploring the Badlands. But then, yeah, as I explored the other biomes, I found that it evened out into a bit more of a palatable visual approach. It was just so saturated right from the get-go that it felt kind of like a surprise. It sort of feels like you're being thrown into a more cartoony version of Minecraft than you're used to, and we're used to talking about Minecraft in kind of cartoony terms, but then the traditional default graphics look kind of muted by comparison. They always feel restrained compared to how Vibrant Visuals looks now. I will say that the lighting effects load faster than I was used to on Minecraft RTX, because I think the way the path tracing works is kind of similar to if you've ever watched a frame of a 3D modeling or 3D rendering software like render in real time, and you can take a look at preview images of it. Whenever it's coding light and rendering light on a surface, it always has this kind of grainy thing, like almost as though you've turned up the ISO setting on a camera.
Yep.
And there's all of that kind of scattering of pixels of different colors that eventually, you know, fade and blend together and get suffused with the light that you're trying to create in the scene. It would be doing that in real time as you go through Minecraft RTX, which would mean sometimes if you turn suddenly, you'd have this kind of grainy after image on the scene in front of you for a couple of seconds before everything kind of mellowed and it figured out where the light was going and what it was combining with, and some of the more complex light calculations it had to do, which obviously isn't the case with Minecraft RTX. They've done a lot of the emissions mapping and stuff like that, but there's not as much real-time path tracing going on, so it doesn't have to render it in the same way. It can render a lot faster on modern hardware. So with my system, it was looking fine. It wasn't kind of leaving any kind of weird motion blur to looking around the way I occasionally experience with Minecraft RTX. And like you, I was really impressed with the water and the reflections. I think reflections are really effective, and about 95% of the time they are well presented. I did notice a couple of moments where if there was a tree between me and a river, the reflection didn't render correctly because it's not rendering the landscape that's on the other side of the tree. And so while naturally you would expect there to be the reflection of, you know, a hill on the other side of a river or something like that, whatever landscape is on the opposite bank, it was rendering the canopy of the tree as sort of like an obfuscating texture. And so if you jumped up and down during that, then the reflection would move and the reflection of the tree would move, but you wouldn't see anything around where the tree was. And it looked really disjointed when you were jumping. So there's these occasional moments of broken immersion, but outside of that, with the reflections up relatively high, whatever I left them on as the default, they're probably high or ultra, it really looked quite cool. I think it's best when you're by a shore, like you said, around the time like the sun is either rising or setting, and especially if there are firefly bushes around, because then you get that effect that everyone wants from fireflies, where there's this kind of magical glow to the air and it's reflected on the water, and the water also has the subsurface scattering effect that you were talking about, which I think I like more at lower depths than I do in the shallow regions, mostly because it starts to feel like a fairly repetitive texture looking down on it, and it obscures the texture of the blocks below, so I'm not always certain if I'm looking at like certain things. I can tell the difference between sand and gravel and dirt and clay, but I think I'd like the play of light on the blocks to be maybe a little more subtle. Either way, I think it's really nice to see effects like that, and the effect that they have on the environment feels like a change towards something that, if not more realistic, is at least more immersive and feels more kind of like lived in and vibrant, which is really the mission statement of all of this. My chat was comparing the way the subsurface scattering and that kind of like water diffusing light through it to the way Skulk Vein and lava blocks look a little bit. That kind of like tinkle of light underneath the surface in Skulk Vein that's kind of glittering every so often. And I think overall the effect is a good one, and it's best when you're moving around. This is something I found about the shadows as well, is that I think thematically the pixel shadows are a really great direction for Minecraft to take, because snapping things to the pixel grid and allowing light to move through individual pixels when there's like leaves that, even when they're clustered together, it will still find the gaps between the two different leaf textures and, you know, print the shadow of the leaf on the ground. I think that's a very stylish approach, but if you stand still and watch it for a while, because it maybe updates the lighting angle every, I don't know, second or 2 seconds or something like that, it feels a little bit jerky. Like it feels like, you know, it doesn't move as smoothly as you might expect a shadow to, just because of how long a Minecraft day takes. It's got to go through this amount of iterations within 10 minutes. And I think the player shadow and mob shadows, by contrast, move very smoothly, but they still stay attached to the pixel grid. So those feel effective, and they don't really break your immersion as you're running around. You don't notice the movement of the neighboring shadows as much as you're moving around, but when you stand still, everything starts to move a little bit like stop motion. And it doesn't necessarily feel great all of the time, but I think when you've got solid blocks and the shadows are moving, it feels a little bit nicer than when you're looking at like grass or a dead bush or something like that casting a shadow, and it's just moving like in tiny jerky segments, shortening or lengthening.
I did notice the jerky movements when I was stopping to take screenshots, like when I was comparing different settings and staying in the same spot so that the screenshot would be accurate. And I did notice that kind of tick. And I don't notice it in the shaders that I run on Java with pixelated shadows. Now, obviously, it's probably very different tech done very differently. It's meant to emulate vibrant visuals, but not done the same way.
Yeah.
But one thing that they have as a setting in the complementary reimagined shaders is to allow like shadow dithering or softness, and that's how real shadows work. So
yeah,
there's a cast shadow, and if you are close enough to the other surface, you're going to get a very hard edge. But if you are very far away from the surface, then you're going to have a more of a softer edge. And that's something I find missing from vibrant visuals shadows, is that my shadow on the ground is hard edged pixels, whereas my shadow in the shaders has a little bit of a softer edge to it, depending on if I'm moving or if I'm staying still. And I think that that's an interesting difference. I overall really enjoyed the shadows. I thought it was nice that even though I felt that the light was being kind of faked and oversaturated in the surface of blocks that where light was hitting, I did really enjoy the coolness of the shadows. Like if you look at the shadows on grass, it's got a bluish tint to it in the meadows anyway, or in the like a plains biome, which is where I spent most of my time. And I like that, because as an artist, that's what I would do. Like I would put blue in the shadow to kind of cool them down and make them recede and not have them get muddy. Like you don't want to just have like in the same way that you were complaining about Java fog being this white kind of opaque mist over everything. You don't want shadows in vibrant visuals to look like a black mist over everything. Like you don't want it to look like a black film. You want it to have some sort of color so it maintains the vibrance of the world. It doesn't make things look really muddy. And so I did really like the shadows as well. I liked the directional shadows on the fence gates and like different things that were around the village that were casting shadows. I did like and noted the difference. I don't remember whether it was medium to high or high to ultra, but at some point you lose the pixel holes in leaves in your shadows. So if you want that and you don't have it, you have to up the shadow quality level until you start to see the dappling of the sun through the leaves in your trees in your builds. I think it does look a little bit strange when you've got like the same sort of shadow that's cast by a building, cast by a tree. I understand some people might be restricted by performance, but hopefully you can get at least your shadows up to the level where you can see the dappling of the sunlight. Because walking through forests, I was actually thinking like, I should make a video and just record an hour of walking through forests in Minecraft, because it was just so visually pleasing to have the dappled sunlight go by as you go by fallen logs and you hop up and down a couple of little hills. And it was really pleasant to walk through the forests in Minecraft with the sun and vibrant visuals. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it would be a pretty fun, like, peaceful relaxation kind of like work study video to have like a kind of a walk through a Minecraft forest and occasional like animal noises as you go past. But yeah, I do think in forest especially the technique shines. And I think one of the strongest positives I had was one that I didn't find when I was exploring in survival, but once we hopped into creative and I warped myself to a pale garden, I think the fog and light rays in a pale garden really amplify the atmosphere that they're trying to create with those biomes. And the interesting thing that occurs there is that the sky changes much more definitively than it does in any other biome in the overworld. You can't see the sun anymore. And something that I think the game has room for improvement when it comes to vibrant visuals. This may also be a Bedrock thing. I don't know quite how weather typically works, but in Bedrock Edition with vibrant visuals, the sun and the typical clouds stay there even when it starts raining, or if you switch the weather to stormy, you still see the sun and you still see gaps in the clouds. The sky color doesn't really change all that much. And I think that's kind of weird for the vibrant visuals side of things. But if you're going through a pale garden, even in full normal daylight, you lose the sun from the sky entirely. It turns that pale gray that we've seen in Java Edition, even in default graphics. But the rays of sunlight start to feel like moonlight instead. Like they're still coming through. You just can't see their source. And as you're walking around at ground level, it adds to the atmosphere. The fog is really increased as well. And so it sort of starts to feel like, yeah, these shafts of light are kind of illuminating spots in the fog, and the sun is straining to come through the canopy and being restricted from that. And I think it looked really spooky. It was even the case when you got up onto the canopy, you couldn't really see all that much around you because of the way they've changed the way fog works. And I think it was really effective. So genuinely, Pale Gardens, I don't know if they've been developed with this in mind, considering that Vibrant Visuals was probably being developed kind of a contemporary with the Pale Garden update, but they've really made that biome shine further than it already has by the addition of Vibrant Visuals. I think it's a much more atmospheric experience, even the default graphics with all of the changes they made to it.
I had a similar experience when I was caving. I didn't dig. I just kind of found a ravine and kind of followed things down and just kind of worked my way around until I got low enough. And as I was winding back up and around through some caves, it was raining on the surface, but there was a hole that exposed the sky, and therefore the light that was coming in, not sunlight, but well, actually, right now there's a bit of a bug where if it rains in Vibrant Visuals, the sun is still out.
Yeah.
But I couldn't tell because I couldn't actually see the sky or see the sun from where I was. But it was this light shaft coming down through the top of this cave, and it was like, I don't know, the cave was 30 blocks tall. So having both a waterfall coming in from a water source, rain coming in from above, and the light reflecting off the water, reflecting off the different things around it was really cool, because you're in a very dark part of the cave minus the torches I've laid down, and being able to see that and then surrounding blocks, kind of getting an idea for the lay of the land, like it was a really cool experience. It looked just like seeing, a spelunking scene from a documentary or a movie or something dramatic from a fantasy film, where like you almost expect the light there to be cast down on something important, like a crypt in Indiana Jones or something like that. And to that effect, like that's something that you could do on purpose. Like if you found one of these caves and you were carving it out, or you created your own, like you could have holes in the ceiling hit certain parts of your build at certain times of day with Vibrant Visuals, and use that to highlight things like, like a sword in the stone or like something cool, right? And I thought that was really inspiring in terms of like what it was doing. The caves are very dark. It's very similar to caving with shaders on in Java, except for usually with shaders in Java, you'll have some sort of emissive. So like if you're holding a torch, you'll be able to light your way, but obviously that's not the case with Vibrant Visuals. But I did find that things like glow lichen, lava pools, I found an abandoned mine shaft, so there was some torches and some other light sources down there. That sort of stuff really helped when you're going around the caves, because you can see potential resources like a beacon in the dark. Like it was just like, oh, you should go that way. Like watch where you're going, but like you should head over in that direction. It's probably going to be more interesting than just traveling down this dark tunnel blind. And I thought that was really cool. Same thing with when you stumble upon redstone, like you're mining out some iron or something, and then you hit a redstone block, and then it lights up, and of course it lights up all the blocks around it. And you're like, oh, cool, there's more over there. I found a diamond that way. Like that kind of stuff I think was really, really cool. The tricky part that I was critical of at first until I was like, well, I'm being dumb, was I was looking for water because I was like, all right, well, I'm on my way down. I'm getting lower levels. I'm going to want to grab a bucket of water because I had enough iron to make a bucket. I couldn't find any water. And I was like, then I tripped over it. It's like, well, I can't see it. Like, it's gray. Of course it's gray. There's no sky to reflect to make the water blue. So the water is gray because the ceiling of the cave is gray and everything around it is gray. And so the only thing you could see in the water would be light reflected from either your torch or a nearby light source like a glow lichen or something. I thought that was really cool. Once you knew what to look for, you could spot water pretty easily after that. But going in there with Minecraft brain looking for blue water doesn't exist in the cave. Like you have to, it's clear. And I thought that was a really cool touch. Like I thought that made a lot of sense, you know, and so I was able to find water easily after that. But there are some tricks when you're underground with vibrant visuals. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I died is that I mistook a shadow for solid ground. It was not. And I ended up falling like 4 or 5 blocks, and I only had like leather boots, so I took some damage. So like that kind of stuff is, you have to be really careful with how you're traveling and what really is solid. And in a way that's good. Like it makes you more cautious, makes you a little bit more aware of the world around you. But at the same time, you've got like this new way of looking at Minecraft that's making some things look like what they're not. And I don't know if that's necessarily the intention of what they want to do with vibrant visuals. So it's a kind of a give and take. Like some people are going to like that and some people are going to find it really frustrating.
Yeah, I found water a little bit too transparent, if anything. Like, I think maybe adding a bit more texture into it by default could help, even though it's really being treated as a different type of material than a lot of the other stuff that's just a physical block. There aren't that many fluids in Minecraft, so obviously they want to handle them with some sort of special attention, and I really felt like water had a lot more going for it than lava. Like, when I went to the Nether, I found that obviously a lot of block light sources aren't casting the same type of shadows that the weather is. Like, the sun is the thing that's casting the pixelated shadows, and everything else is just glowing with different levels of intensity of light. And so glowstone torches, lava blocks, like any of that stuff is not going to cast a shadow in quite the same way as some of the shadows that you see in the overworld. And then, like, I think the caving experience worked fine for me. Like, bringing torches down with me was fine. But yeah, I do think it was a little difficult to spot water when it wasn't interacting with the other environment in some way. Like, if it wasn't turning lava into obsidian at a certain patch so you could kind of see where it spread out, or if, you know, you didn't see a creeper walk into it and then be carried away downstream, it was a little difficult to tell when if water was falling in like a corner next to some stone and it wasn't really reflecting anything other than the stone around it. It sort of felt like an invisible kind of line there. So, yeah, I think maybe there's a little bit of stuff there that could be refined about it. I didn't really look at what water looked like in the End dimension, where it's purple natively in the End on Bedrock Edition. Like, it has a different water color in default graphics, but that hasn't come to all platforms yet. It's certainly not on Java Edition. I don't know if they plan on doing that or if they're just going to like leave that the same as it's always been, but it would definitely reflect differently on the sky of the End as well, because the skybox in the End is more vibrant now than it has been in default graphics before. It's more purple, and I think there are some really cool effects going on in the End that aren't present in default at all. There are these occasional bursts of light in the distance that cast temporary shadows, almost like a flash of lightning in a Scooby-Doo cartoon, the way they'll draw a shadow on the ground for a little bit longer to kind of see, you know, that light fade, and so you can get the sense that there's a sinister figure in the doorway. It does that, but it looks really cool when you're out on the outer islands and there's chorus plants everywhere. And then this one kind of like burst, this sort of in the End nova that's around you, this burst of light will happen. Not like a camera bulb going off, not like the screenshot button flashbangs you, but like you get this occasional sort of glow that will come up, and it will be like this kind of shadow cast on the ground that fades subtly over time. And if there were more opportunities for them to do stuff like that, I think there could be some really fun stuff that they do with the lighting engine. And so, if they end up doing something like that with the Deep Dark, even, like having kind of the Warden's shadow cast over you at a certain point could be kind of fun. But that starts to get into like dynamic shadows territory. I think them just having fun with lighting angles appearing randomly as part of the end skybox is a great way to set vibrant visuals apart from what I've seen other people do with shaders up until now. So I think that's really interesting. The lighting angle actually changing dynamically but not linear, being kind of random, is super fun. So I recommend checking out the end if you haven't had a chance to already. Just teleport yourself out there with commands and give it a go. The obsidian pillars on the main island aren't quite as dramatic as chorus plants because they're obviously very uniform shadows, but you can still notice it there as well. I do think that you've probably seen this a little bit, having swapped back and forth to default graphics where you could to take comparison screenshots. Switching back to regular Minecraft graphics does feel dull by comparison when you've been looking at how bright Vibrant Visuals is for a while. So they're definitely living up to the Vibrant name.
I agree. I think they've overdone it. Like I kind of feel like there's a happy medium between the chill, kind of like relaxed experience of default Minecraft visuals, and this is not my own thought. I've read this online in a review where they really feel like the level of vibrance from Vibrant Visuals is kind of going against the chill vibe that Minecraft has. Like it looks more like Nintendo, like Mario Kart or Mario World. And that is usually a lot more running around and jumping and bopping things on the head, right? Whereas the chill building that happens in Minecraft, or the chill walking over the countryside and exploring, it's not always, it doesn't need to be quite as vibrant all the time. And so I'm kind of surprised that they've gone this far. I think it's an excellent first step. Like I think that it's a great foot forward. I'm trying to put my head in the headspace of Bedrock players that have had nothing like this of any kind, right? So I've had various different shaders over the years that I can play with in Java Edition, but having not been able to do that in Bedrock, I think that this is certainly great for Bedrock players that have either nothing or this. Like I think that that's a cool thing to go there. But I'm curious how you feel. But given what they said, what Jeb said when they announced Vibrant Visuals back in Minecraft Live, and the kind of steps that they've had recently, compared to their announcement videos for the release, the advertisement videos, and like kind of like summary videos close to release, and what we got, it doesn't feel finished to me. Like this doesn't feel like the final product, or does it feel quite like it delivers everything that they say? Like, yeah, it's vibrant, but like they're not, like they're talking about things, making things look more beautiful and have things more, sing more, and like the language that they use in the descriptions, even in the things that we've read out today, are not quite what I witnessed when I logged in to move around in Bedrock. I feel like it was loud in some places and oversaturated, and it feels like a bunch of subjective creative decisions being made by Mojang. And as you mentioned, as the default graphic settings for people that can handle it, which is an odd thing to do for Minecraft, which they are usually so careful about telling players what they can do with what blocks, and what textures are going where. So like it feels like a strange decision to not only make it default, but also make it such a bold decision. Like it's not like there's a subtle yellow in the savannah. Like it's yellow. It's unmistakable. Even the classic dirt block in Minecraft is very red in midday when you get the sun overhead in a regular plains biome, to the point where like I wouldn't want to use it for anything other than a very, very red dirt block. But it's not going to stay that way. It's going to change as the day goes by. So I thought that was a little bit strange. How do you feel? Like, how do you feel about the state of it? Like, do you feel like it was polished, or do you feel like it's kind of like a iterative process?
I think it's definitely iterative. Like, I think they've talked about this as a new direction for Minecraft, which I presume means that they are continuing to travel that direction, not that they've just, we've taken this journey and now we're finished, like this doesn't feel like the destination to me. This feels like stage one. And obviously with them developing new features and potentially, new biomes, environments, effects and that kind of thing, vibrant visuals can be part of that conversation now, and maybe can shape the future of what those things look like, with a nod to default graphics still, because some people simply aren't going to be able to play with vibrant visuals because of their hardware or a preference. So I think while there is still room for improvement, I think it's delivering on what they've set out in a subjective way, but then beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, and like a lot of artistic decisions like this are going to be subjective. You're not necessarily going to always enjoy the visual feel of any video game. Like even my favorite games, I still have like some kind of gripes with things visually. I think the key is always going to be dialogue with players and a level of control that we can exercise over things.
Yes.
Like you, I found interacting with the settings for vibrant visuals a little bit frustrating, and it may be because of the way you have to scroll and not having easier options to scroll to the vibrant visual settings. That might be why I didn't really touch them all that much on my live stream, but I think as long as they keep iterating on that aspect, as long as they give players access to the under-the-hood stuff so that we can change the emissions mapping and the bump mapping and textures and like how reflective certain blocks are, and ideally a bit more of the color mapping side of things, so you can reduce some of the heavy saturation, so you can make the lighting in the mesa not so orange that it just amplifies the orange that's already all around you, and things like that. Like if we can tinker with it on that level of detail, then I think it's a great start. Like if this is the foundation that's being laid for whatever they're building on top of this, I think they've done okay. That said, I'll go over a couple of things I think I have room for improvement marked down here. I mentioned the weather earlier, and the fact that you don't really see the clouds and stuff build up when rain starts or a storm begins. I think it doesn't do enough to show a contrast between regular daylight and stormy, and that's a problem for gameplay, because mobs start to come out when the light level dips below a certain point because of stormy weather. And the difference is barely noticeable to the player on vibrant visuals compared to on Java Edition. At least the experience is usually the environment gets really dark and then the sky clouds over completely. It's like all overcast. And that's usually my sign to go to bed, because I don't want mobs coming out and disturbing what I'm doing. But you can't really see either in the sky or block lighting around you when a storm is happening in vibrant visuals. The distance fog is affected slightly, but you can only see that from a higher vantage point, or if you're in an empty landscape like a plains biome. I was triggering a storm from a dark oak forest, noticing no difference except suddenly there were zombies behind every tree. So I think there's maybe some gameplay aspects that need a bit of tweaking. Likewise, you mentioned the volumetric fog in water and how visible everything is underwater. That might be something I need to go in and tweak if I play again, because I found swimming down into water got very dark very quickly, and I was looking at silhouettes and shadows around me instead of solid blocks. It was kind of like the experience of swimming in lava when you're trying to get through a pocket of lava in the nether with a fire resistance potion and you can barely see 2 blocks in front of you. So maybe I need to tinker with that setting a little bit. I think a few of the blocks still have, by default, artificially shiny textures. I think the standout to me really was obsidian. I created a nether portal, and I recognize that obsidian is meant to be glassy, like obsidian in real life, but I think the reflections obscure that jagged texture too much, and it looks too smooth. And I realized the comparison I was making in my brain was it's kind of like a glossy cereal box. Obviously, it doesn't help that a lot of Minecraft blocks are these cubes to begin with, but it did look like the kind of gloss that you get on like a box of cornflakes or something like that, where there's like a little bit of a sheen to the outside of it, right? So there's a couple of things like that, and glass not casting a shadow is weird to me, because I know it's meant to be a transparent block, so you imagine it shouldn't, but the edge pixels don't even cast a shadow. If you place a glass block in the world, the lighting engine barely acknowledges that it's there. So you may as well, like visually speaking, just have a hole in your house instead of a window. I don't think colored lighting is necessarily within scope, so I don't think stained glass should have an effect necessarily on like the light color, but I think if glass doesn't have a connected texture, render shadows for those border pixels so that the glass casts a bit of a shadow on the floor. I think I was expecting that, and so when that didn't happen, it was kind of jarring that the glass was not having any effect on the environment around it. So there's little things like that for me that are adding up to, this isn't necessarily blowing me away, but I think there's such a strong foundation there, especially given that this is being developed in-house by Mojang, and they are able to shape it with the direction that gameplay is being shaped for the future as well. So if they have anything that there feels like there is good synergy between stuff they want to add and an effect Vibrant Visuals can bring to that, then that's where I'm really excited about it, because that's when they can start to shape the experience into something like how Pale Gardens feel in Vibrant Visuals, where the atmosphere is just built upon by Vibrant Visuals and it really feels like part of the experience.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And I am looking forward to it making it into the snapshots for Java, where we can have time to give some feedback, see what it looks like, see what kind of controls they give. I'm anticipating that there'll be, just by virtue of the interface alone, more controls in Java, because Bedrock, you have to be aware of like mobile and different consoles and all that kind of stuff, where Java is just on a PC, so you can have a little bit more refinement. And then to your point earlier about having resource packs and or data packs or mods available by players in the space, saying like, well, Vibrant Visuals got us this far, here's like even a data pack that says like, press this key to bring up your Vibrant Visual settings as you're adjusting them. Like that alone would be worth having as a small data pack, so hopefully that kind of thing will then encourage Mojang to say, all right, well, if this is already being developed in the community, we should really consider putting it into the default settings for Vibrant Visuals on Java. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of control they'll give the players. Nothing that you do in the Bedrock settings in terms of going to low, there's no off. So you can't go in there and decide, I really don't like this volumetric fog, but boy, do I really like these reflections. You have to have them all. Even if they're at the lowest setting, it's a quality setting. It's not an on-off, or it's not a intensity setting. I think, and that's something I was surprised at as well, is that the settings on a lot of those things were about the quality. Like, it's going to be rendered. It's just a matter of what the quality of the render is. None of it was related to the intensity of it, which we've seen in Java Edition recently, or in recent years, I guess I should say, in terms of things like the wobble when you go through a portal, the nausea effect, those kind of things, the glint on enchanted items and whatnot. You can change the speed and intensity now. That kind of granular setting is the kind of things I'm hoping we get with Vibrant Visuals, for both an accessibility standpoint, but also just from a subjective standpoint, so that players can be like, I'm so happy this is here, let me dial it in so that it works in my world exactly how I want.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's still room for all of that stuff to come through in future iterations, both for Bedrock and for Java Edition. So, as always, we'd love to hear from the audience. If you've been playing with Vibrant Visuals, if you're a Bedrock Edition player, let us know your early thoughts, and we'd love to get some feedback on that for next week's show and beyond, as people settle into Chase the Skies as an update. For now, that's going to wrap up this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about our show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. We'll have lots of juicy screenshots from our gameplay this week as well, so if you're interested in checking out some of the stuff that accompanies this discussion, it's all there on thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any tier gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week. We also have our monthly hangouts, where our patrons can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft, and we always have a good discussion about trends and stuff in the building and redstone parts of the community, at least. We currently have 282 patrons, which is down one from last week. We'd love to see that number continue to creep back up towards 300. And we give special thanks to our content engineer patrons who help make this show possible. Thank you to Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are published on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms, and that includes a video version on YouTube and on Spotify. You can email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Find the RSS feed on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixel Riffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide will be back this week as I explore more of the Chase the Skies update. I'm also a streamer on Twitch. I stream 3 days a week over there doing behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series and playing other games from time to time. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. And aside from that, I'm at Pixel Riffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, which is available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. We're going to be recording a new episode this week, probably watching Predator, Killer of Killers on Disney+, but also Steven has watched Andor and all caught up on that, and I watched Gladiator 2. So there's a bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about on the Citadel Cafe this coming week. You can also find me on social media at Joel Duggan, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday. Currently on a pretty big push to finish up West Hill, so there's a lot of Minecraft happening. And as I mentioned, if we get into some Java snapshots with vibrant visuals, I'm probably going to start a Java world for that too. So check that out. It's very easy to find over on Twitch. Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but there's Cheeto dust everywhere.